The Trail of Shadows, a hiker's nightmare. In 2008, an 18-year-old named Matt Higgins set off on an adventure he had dreamed of for years. Inspired by the movie Into the Wild, he yearned for the raw, untamed wilderness, a place where he could test himself against nature and, perhaps, find something deeper within. His plan was ambitious. He would hike the entire California section of the Pacific Crest Trail, a grueling 1,700-mile trek stretching from the scorching deserts near the Mexican border to the misty, forested mountains near Oregon. It was a journey that would test his endurance, patience, and ultimately his sanity. Matt was no stranger to the outdoors. He had spent his childhood hiking through the wilds of Oregon, camping in both marked and unmarked territories, navigating through dense woods where predators lurked unseen. But nothing, not even his years of experience, could have prepared him for what awaited him deep in the Lassen National Forest. A silent encounter. The first weeks of his hike were uneventful, even serene. He moved at his own pace, camping wherever he found a clearing, surviving on carefully rationed food. The occasional rattlesnake or unexpected dehydration spell was nothing new. But as he entered the remote, suffocating depths of Lassen National Forest, the air itself seemed to change. The trees pressed in closer, their gnarled limbs intertwining overhead, casting deep, shifting shadows even in broad daylight. The silence became oppressive. One afternoon, as he rounded a bend in the trail, he saw them. A man and a woman sat on a boulder just off the path. They were dressed entirely in white, loose, flowing clothes that seemed out of place in the rugged wilderness. Their faces were gaunt, their skin pale and smeared with dirt. The man had a thick, wild beard. The woman's hair was long and tangled. But what sent a chill creeping up Matt's spine was their eyes. They weren't merely watching him. They were staring at him, unblinking, their expressions unreadable. The longer he looked, the more unnatural they seemed. Their clothes were ragged, yet they sat in eerie stillness, their posture unnaturally stiff. Something about them felt wrong, as though they had been waiting for him. Matt hesitated, forcing himself to glance away. He muttered a quick hello as he passed them, but they didn't respond. Not a wave, not a nod, not even a flicker of recognition that he had spoken. Just those vacant, dead-eyed stares following him as he walked by. Unease prickled the back of his neck, but he shook it off. Maybe they were drifters. Maybe they didn't speak English. He had no reason to worry. Or so he thought. The chase in Mount Shasta. After several nights of eerie disturbances in Lassen, Matt was determined to get as far away as possible. His unease had solidified into cold fear. He needed to push forward, put miles between himself and the faceless horror that lurked just beyond the glow of his campfire. And so, for the next few days, he hiked harder than ever, barely stopping to eat, always checking over his shoulder. By the time he reached Mount Shasta, exhaustion weighed on him like lead, but relief stirred in his gut. He had left Lassen behind. He was in a new stretch of the trail. Surely he had lost them. Then, on the fourth day in the Mount Shasta wilderness, Matt turned around while hiking and his breath caught in his throat. Far down the trail, almost too far to be real, two tiny white figures. The people in white. His stomach lurched. How was this possible? He had traveled over 50 miles since his last sighting of them. He had cut through rugged terrain, crossed rivers, climbed ridges. There was no way they could have kept pace. And yet, there they were. A deep animalistic instinct kicked in. Run. Matt didn't stop to question it. He turned back around and sprinted forward, his heavy pack slamming against his back. His boots pounded the dirt trail. His breath came in ragged gasps. He ran and ran and ran until his muscles burned and his vision blurred. But when he risked a glance behind him, they were closer, still too far to make out their expressions, but their white clothing stood out like smudges of bone against the dark trees. They weren't running. They weren't rushing. But somehow they were gaining on him. A desperate escape. That night, Matt refused to make camp anywhere near the trail. He ventured deep into the trees, carving his own path through the underbrush. When he finally found a clearing, he didn't even bother unpacking his things. Instead, he gathered fallen branches and arranged them in a wide circle around his tent, his last line of defense. Inside his tent, he clutched his knife, every nerve on high alert. He lay awake for hours, listening. Then, a snap. One of the sticks. Matt's grip on the knife tightened so hard his knuckles ached. He stopped breathing. Then came another step. And another. And then, the whispering. It floated in from every direction. Low, urgent murmurs, voices just beneath the threshold of understanding. A conversation he wasn't meant to hear. And then something new. A light. A flashlight beam sliced through the dark, illuminating the fabric of his tent. A shadow moved just outside. The light clicked off. Matt's pulse screamed at him to move. But before he could, there was a rush of footsteps. Running footsteps, straight toward his tent. Matt didn't think. He exploded from his sleeping bag, tearing the zipper down in a single violent motion. He lunged outside, brandishing his knife in wild terror. The forest swallowed him in darkness. His breath came in jagged bursts. Nothing. No figures, no flashlights, no whispering. But they were there. He could feel them. Matt turned and ran. Branches clawed at his arms, his legs. He tripped, stumbled, caught himself. But he didn't stop. He didn't stop running until his lungs burned and his legs screamed for mercy. Only when the first hints of dawn broke the horizon did he finally collapse against a tree, gasping for air. The final escape. Matt reached the small town of Castella, California, later that day. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't slept. He was barely standing. When he stumbled into civilization, he immediately found a ranger station and told them everything. About the people in white, the stolen food, the whispering, the relentless chase. The authorities took his report. But when they investigated the trail near Lassen and Mount Shasta, they found nothing. No tracks, no signs of the people in white, no evidence that anyone had been there at all. Matt never finished his hike. He left the trail that day, his body intact, but his mind forever marked by what had happened. To this day, he wonders, who were they? What did they want? And what would have happened if they had finally caught up to him? He never went back to find out. It was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime. A journey into the raw, untouched wilderness of one of the most isolated places on Earth. The Torngat Mountains, where jagged peaks claw at the sky and icy fjords slice through the land like the veins of some ancient sleeping beast. But for 49-year-old Matt Dyer, this adventure would transform into a waking nightmare. One that would leave him battered, broken, and staring into the gaping maw of death itself. The arrival. On July 19, 2013, Matt boarded a tiny 19-seat Twin Otter airplane at Montreal International Airport in Canada. His destination was one of North America's most unforgiving landscapes. A place so remote that it was closer to the Arctic Circle than to civilization. The journey would take him and 7 other adventure seekers into a place few dared to tread. A place ruled not by men, but by monsters of the wild. Matt wasn't a wealthy man. A small-town lawyer from Maine, he dedicated his life to providing free or low-cost legal assistance to the state's poorest residents. But he was also an avid outdoorsman, lured by the promise of true, unspoiled wilderness. When he first saw the ad for a 2-week expedition into the Torngats in a Sierra Club magazine, the hefty $6,000 price tag barely gave him pause. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to witness nature at its most primal. 2.5 hours later, the Twin Otter descended over a narrow gravel airstrip, surrounded by dense forest on one side and an endless river on the other. The group gathered their gear and shuffled toward a cluster of flimsy plywood structures, their temporary base camp. The real journey, however, lay even deeper within the mountains, accessible only by float plane. For 2 days, the adventurers reviewed emergency procedures, hiking routes, and the harsh realities of surviving in the Torngats. And then, finally, they were ready. The float plane roared to life, lifting them off the water and soaring toward the unknown. As they broke through the thick clouds, the Torngat Mountains revealed themselves for the first time. It was a place that looked utterly alien. A world sculpted not by time, but by the violence of glaciers that had carved their way through the earth over millennia. Towering, jagged peaks loomed over glassy fjords, their blue-green depths so clear that Matt could see fish moving just beneath the surface. It was breathtaking and foreboding. But beneath the beauty lurked something far more sinister. The campsite on the edge of a death zone. After a 45-minute flight, the float plane touched down on a small water inlet. Matt and the others disembarked, their boots sinking into the damp earth as they watched their only link to the outside world disappear into the sky. Their campsite was perched on a wide-open plain, just a few hundred feet from the water's edge. Unlike the previous base camp, there was no forest for cover, just vast, barren land stretching to the towering peaks beyond. This was pure, untamed wilderness. Rich Gross and Marta Chase, the two Sierra Club trip leaders, directed the group to set up their tents. Once they had finished, they encircled the site with a small electric fence, meant to deter curious wildlife. It was a feeble barrier against the true rulers of this land. That first evening, as they took their group photo, excitement buzzed in the air. The adventure was finally beginning. But in the days to come, something unsettling happened. They saw them. Massive white figures moving silently along the fjord.